I wanted to just start by telling you a little bit about like who I am, because I think most people here aren't very familiar with me, and maybe you haven't seen me before. So I'm from Iceland. I live in Italy at the moment, but I grew up in Iceland. I studied biology at the University of Iceland, so I have a bachelor's degree in biology, and then I went to Denmark to study veterinary medicine at the Royal Veterinary and Agricultural University, that it was called back then. And then I started working in Iceland after I graduated. I started working in Iceland in a small animal veterinary clinic. And then I became, well, I already had developed an interest for behavior. So I decided to add a degree in behavioral counseling. And I did study that in the UK. He's like, at the moment, I have two dogs. That's Sunna, the smaller one, and the bigger one is called Odin. He only has one eye, hence the name. He's a little Italian street dog that I rescued from the street here in Italy. And I want to tell you a little bit about why I started studying animal behavior. I knew ever since I was a child that I wanted to be a veterinarian. So I was always preparing for that. Even when I did the biology studies at the University of Iceland, I knew that I wanted to go on and study veterinary medicine. But it wasn't, we don't have a vet school in Iceland, so I had to go abroad. So I decided to start with the biology and prepare and apply for schools as well, because it's not so easy to get into vet school. Maybe you know about that. This talk here taught me a big lesson. I think a lot of us who are into dogs, we have this one dog that taught us a big lesson. And for me, it was this dog, Snout. Snout was the first dog that I got as a puppy. So this was while I was studying biology. It was before I started studying veterinary medicine. So I just moved in with my husband. We got married, and we had a kid, and we had the dog. So it was like this. I think it's a very common story. So we trained her with the methods that we knew. That was, of course, quite limited in the beginning. We read some books, we went to a training class, and we asked people who already had dogs that we knew, and got some advice here and there, and did our best with the training. And we tried to follow the advice of dog trainers that we had asked and trained with. But when we moved to Denmark, and I started to realize that our dog had developed a behavioral problem. She did not like children, and we had a small boy. And eventually we had an issue where she bit a child that was visiting us. And this was a great shock to us, because we had never thought that she would do anything like that. She grew up with this, our little boy, and we didn't really understand why it had happened. But we also didn't feel safe having a dog in the house who was aggressive towards children. So we ended up opting for euthanasia. And this was a big blow for me, especially because I had, I was a biologist, I was studying veterinary medicine, but I felt like I didn't know very much about behavior. And somehow I felt that I had made a mistake or mistakes when I was training her, and I didn't know what they were, and I didn't know how to fix it. So I became very interested in this topic, and I decided to do a study when this was like my final thesis in vet school, and I studied the reasons for euthanasia of dogs in Iceland. And I found out that 22% of the people who brought their dog into the vets for euthanasia listed a behavioral problem as the reason for the euthanasia. So this is, these are, the columns are it's still in Icelandic there. So the first one, 21% is old age, 37% is disease, 8% accidents, 22% behavioral problem, 6% like personal reasons, like we're moving or something happened in the family, we can't keep the dog anymore, and 8% was like various other reasons. So you can see that behavioral problems is a huge issue. It's a big reason why people give up their dogs first, not only to euthanasia, but also they give up their dogs to a shelter. So this is a very big issue, and I became very passionate about trying to help fix this problem. I've kind of been working in this space for a few years, working as a veterinary behaviorist in Iceland, first in my clinic, and now for the last few years, I've been doing this exclusively. And so I've kind of developed a method that I feel is working for my clients. And of course, it's based on scientific studies on behavior. I'm using positive reinforcement. So people who know about positive dog training, or there's different names for it, but these are like modern methods that are based on scientific studies. There's no punishment or threats or using fear or intimidation to train the dog, and always trying to understand why the dog is doing what they're doing and what's the best way to teach them, and also their emotional state, which I think is super important and not sometimes a little bit overlooked. So I call it the Sunny Way method. After my dog Sunna. She was the kind of the first dog that I trained. She's also actually a dog that came to me as a grown-up dog and had behavioral issues. So I, in the title of the workshop, I talked about the 5 steps. So I'm going to go through the 5 steps, and so just to tell you right away what the steps are, it's so first you have to identify what is the problem. You have to understand why the dog is doing what it's doing. I think that's super, super important to understand that. It's the key to everything. Then you have to know how dogs learn, like how do dogs absorb information? What are the best training methods? And then also it's super important to have a realistic application of the methods. So I've developed my method a little bit, because in the beginning, the way I learned to do it when I was studying, I felt it wasn't a very effective method, because I was doing single sessions with people. So they would I would give them like a lot of information, like there was like this whole list of things you have to do. And I talked to them for 2 hours, and then I realized that they were not absorbing everything, and it's just a lot of people were giving up or having problems because they didn't know how to incorporate all this training into the daily routine with their dogs. So they ran into problems. So I decided to change a little bit and turn it also into a membership rather than doing single sessions with people, because I feel that's more effective, and people have to be aware that this is a long game. Like there's no quick fix. It's this is there's no magic wand. There's no dog whisper where I can just whisper in your dog's ear and fix all their problems like they do sometimes on TV. There's work to be done, and it takes time for for the dog parent to learn all the steps and the methods, and also for the dog to get over their issues. It just takes time. So I'm not gonna tell you that there's a quick fix solution.